Hello to a new video again, and this is going to be an interesting one because I'm not sure if what I'm doing makes sense, but I think it might be a very interesting idea, so I'll share it on Facebook and see what people think. It has to do with long exposure, and I always have trouble. I'm not an expert on how to do the calculations and how to do it the way that I want, right? So there's three sort of points that I want to introduce, and then I will show you the trick which I think is kind of interesting. So the first thing that I never really understand is that you calculate the time for the exposure and not the other way around. So what I mean, I think if you want to have an exposure of, let's say, 3 minutes, then your starting point should be the 3 minutes and then calculate back what your exposure time should be before you set the ND filter. The second thing is I don't want to take my ND filter off, right? Maybe that sounds obvious, but I think that's important. And the third thing I have to explain is a trick that I saw online, so it's not really mine, is that basically there's an interesting relationship between ISO 100 and ISO 6400 and 1 second to a minute. So basically they can relate. So the idea is that if you put your camera into 6400 ISO and you measure 1 second, then it's the same as 1 minute at 100 ISO. And we always want to take a shot at 100 ISO, so if you do it smartly, you can also do it the other way around. If I want to have an exposure time of 1 minute, then I should be able to go to 6400 and aim for 1 second. Hope that still makes sense. Now here's where the trick comes in and what I want to show you. That means that if I understand it correctly, and I tested a few times and it seems to work, that if I turn my camera on and I need to be in bulb mode, I got it on F8 and I want to have an ISO 100. This is kind of the settings that I want, right? So the idea is that you would go out of bulb mode. So here we go to aperture mode. Put the ISO at 6400, here we go, and then we need to be at 1 second. Now I already did it before, so let's assume that my ND filter is all over the place. It's now like this, so I can turn my ND filter, I use a variable ND filter, or I can play with my f-stop and until I reach kind of this 1 second. And now the idea is that if I go back to ISO 100, here we go again, then I should be at 1 minute. Of course now it starts yelling because I can't go to 1 minute, right? So we have to go to bulb mode. Here we go. And then I can use my timer. In this case I use the MIOPS remote timer to set the timer and do our thing. Now the trick I wanted to tell you is that I don't want to do all these settings. So basically if that's my plan, if I want to do a long exposure, I decide what the time I want. So let's assume for now, let's go for a minute, right? So if we go for a minute exposure, what does the setting need to be, right? And first I need to measure, right? I need to figure out what my time should be. So I want to reach a minute, so I know that I want to have 1 second exposure at the 6400 level. But I don't want to flip all the knobs because I forget to put the bulb mode or whatever, right? So what I did is I programmed one of the buttons using the memory recall to do the setting for me. So in this case, because it was a free button, I'm now using temporarily the button on my lens, right? So turn it on. And the only thing that I did, if I press it, I put it on 6400, as you can see, right? And I put it on, what else did I need to do? Of course I took it out and I put it in not in manual mode anymore, but in aperture mode, right? So that basically I can see my reading. So if I remove it, I'm in bulb mode, I can't see my reading, it's ISO 100. But if I press the button, you'll see that it goes to 6400 fixed because I need that for the calculation, and I'm in the correct sort of shooting mode so that the measurement works. So I'm in aperture mode, as you can see. So the idea is that if, let's put this at a random mode again, I know that I want to go for 1 minute exposure time because that's nice for the water or whatever you want to do. I just press the button, I aim for 1 second because that's kind of the calculation trick. So here we go. And again, I'm now using the ND filter. The nice thing that it's also focusing for me because I turn this into a focus button. Right? I can decide to turn it automatically, let it focus or not. So this action doesn't only does the measurement, but it also focuses for me. I could have put it in DMF, of course, and I can still do the hand sort of adjusting. But I see that I am now indeed at 1 second at 6400, and it should relate to 1 minute at ISO 100. So I go into my my app. I set the timer. So let me put this in the screen, and let me turn this back a little bit so that you can see it. Hopefully a bit. Well, still a bit sorry for that, but I will put it on 1 minute. 1 minute, there we go. That was 10 seconds. I don't really understand this timer sometimes. So this is 1 minute. So here we go. So put it on 1 minute. We'll start the timer. There it goes. And let's see what happens when the minute is over. So let me turn this back up. Now you can't see the display anymore, but we will wait for a minute. So the whole idea is that because of this fixed relation between 6400 and 100 ISO, I can do this trick that I can sort of program a button into that setting, and then I should know the calculation the other way around, if that makes sense, right? So let's see if that is correct. So we still need to do another 20 seconds and then we should see our resulting image. Now what I could have done, and I will do it a second time, is first take the picture at 6400 to have a comparison, right? Because it should basically be kind of the same image, except it is taken at 6400 and not at the 100. So there it went, it's done. It's writing into disk, and let's see if it kind of makes sense. Well, you can see this picture looks pretty good, right? So let me shut down my phone so that it will be easier to see. So let's do it one more time and explain sort of the trick again. So I'm in build mode, so totally ready for whatever I want to do. I of course can f-stop what I want, but the build mode, the idea is that you have 100 ISO and in build mode, right? And in manual, but I've programmed the button to override it. So let me put this one in random again. So the idea is that you press the button. It does two things. It focuses, of course, because that's what I put it on, but I can also decide basically by turning this my ND filter what time I want. So let me again put it on 1 second, and now with one difference compared to before. So it's now 1 second. I will take an image that can be my reference image. I did see it jump to 1.3, but it does not come that precise. Of course it becomes more precise if you go into longer distances. You can see that we now have our reference image, so we can check if this is indeed kind of the same later on the histogram as the one with the long exposure. Now the only thing I did, which I already did, I stopped pushing the button, so I'm back in bulb mode automatically, and I will say, well, I know that is 1 second in 6400, that means 1 minute at 100 ISO. Press the button and let's see, in 1 minute we are basically getting the same result, with of course a big difference that, well, let's move something in and out of the view, and we should maybe with a little bit of luck see this thing sort of moving in or not moving in. I'm not sure if it's even in the picture, but let's see what happens. So the time is running, but you can see that I don't have to do any calculation. I don't have to take off my ND filter, and I don't have to put it into bulb mode and take it out of bulb mode, which I think is an important thing. I will also quickly show you how to set this up. We have another 15 seconds and hopefully this has worked. Because again, this is an idea and maybe online people say I'm stupid and there's an easier way of doing it. But I found this quite an interesting trick. And there it goes. And let's see if we kind of got the same image. So we now got this image, and indeed we see this object, this lens sort of moving into the frame. So this is the histogram that I got. Let's go to the previous picture and you can see that it's pretty similar, right? is pretty close, so you can see that of course this is 60 seconds and this is, hold on, 1 second and this is 60 seconds. So this is an old picture, sorry for that. So 1 second and 60 seconds, which makes sense, 1 second, 60 seconds. So it works. So how do I set this up? You go into your menu, you go to, I program it here, but you go into your custom settings. What I did, I went to, and again, did it kind of randomly, so you have to decide which button you want. But I took the focus hold button on the lens. I put it on recall custom hold, and then you set a few values. So hold on, you have to select it, and then you go into this menu. Hopefully you can see this, yes. Shooting mode, I want to go to aperture priority, makes sense. I don't want a fixed aperture because then I can still play around with it. Shutter speed is, I'm not sure why this was on, because it's not, or it's not affected, of course, so that doesn't matter. I want to force it on 6400 ISO to make the calculation work. Metering mode you can set, and I did put it on wide and some other logical settings. You can decide for yourself if you want to do it, and also if you wanted to have autofocusing the moment that your button is pressed, or that you want to just do the manual focus, right? But the main trick is basically the ISO setting, right? And changing the mode to, where was it? To aperture priority mode, because that's otherwise the two settings that you have to flip every time between pictures. So yeah, that's kind of the idea. So tell me if this makes sense, or if this is a stupid idea. Yeah, to me it kind of makes sense. So let's see what you all think about this. Bye bye.